Well, welcome everyone. This is Create a World. Today, I am Elektra Porzel, director of the Language of Consciousness Institute, and I'm in conversation with Megan Patterson, who is the founder of the Worldmind Nature Immersion School. And this is just a disclaimer. The reason I know her is because my grandson attends your school and loves it. He's 11. And it's the first time I've ever heard him love school. Smart kid, but it didn't work in the regular school system. So anyway, I got very excited about it, and I wanted to have a conversation with you, Megan, about the model of learning and how you came upon it. Why don't you describe a little bit to the group, our audience, about I guess the main tenets of the school and and then I'd love to hear about how you really came to create the school.
Yes. So actually, if I could start with that first, because it kind of leads into how we got to where we are now. So I initially discovered the forest school movement, which is an outdoor-based model primarily for early childhood, ages 3 through 6. And I discovered that in my master's program, which is out of Boston, and it is in ecological teaching. So I decided to study that for my master's thesis because I knew that would be beneficial for my son, who was 2 at the time. I wanted to go back to work, and he thrived in an outdoor setting because from the time he could move, he was so curious about everything, and he got into everything in the house and just wanted to see how it works.
Yes.
And so, my anxiety level when we were inside was really high, and I was like, I don't like this, but when we're outside, we can just be out together and exploring, and you can get into things and you can investigate. And it just worked so well for him, and he thrived in that setting. So I really wanted to keep that. And after discovering the forest school model where all learning is done outside, I was like, this would be perfect for him. So I looked for one in Colorado, and there weren't any. And in fact, there were very few across the United States. They started in Scandinavia, had really taken off in the UK and other parts of Europe, like Germany. But just the movement really wasn't taking off here in the US yet. So I decided to start one. I ran into some hurdles with the state. I couldn't get it licensed. So I started it as a child and caregiver class, which was really great. So parents would come and they said, hey, can I bring all of my kids? I was like, yeah, bring them all. So we had infants all the way through 12-year-olds. And I really got to blend my love of teaching with my passion for the outdoors. And bring in that ecological teaching piece as well, that I had learned in my master's program. So we were all over various different areas of Colorado, or the greater Denver area, to be more specific. And then it grew into being able to show the state that kids can be safe outside in all weather if they are adequately dressed. So the motto is, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. And so we launched the first pilot program with them, and are currently the first and only licensed outdoor-based preschool and kindergarten in Colorado. And it's very exciting. They should be coming out with a licensure for the state in the summer. So I've been working with them this year to create that licensure so that this can be an option for other providers and for more students across the state. Out of that came a push from our community to look at an elementary school, because also they noticed that their child was thriving in this environment. And they were like, we know that we can't put them into a more traditional setting. At that point, we hadn't really realized that most of those students were neurodiverse and twice exceptional. Parents just knew that their child was thriving in this environment, and they wanted to keep that, knowing that if they put them in a more traditional setting, that would not be beneficial for them. So luckily we were set up to be completely outside when COVID hit. So 2020, interest in our program doubled, and we were able to start a full elementary school and go all the way through 5th grade. We were able to be outside for the majority of the year, which really helped with COVID. So we were able to be in person. And we only had 2 COVID cases all year. So, you know, from a health standpoint, that really was really beneficial. And as I was looking through I was looking through a lot of the evaluations that were sent to us, I started to see this trend of, oh, most of the students that are naturally coming to us are neurodiverse and twice exceptional. And that's really where I have always thrived, is working with those students that really struggled. And when I did my student teaching, I remember the teacher saying, she's like, Megan, I have never seen anyone that has this ability to recognize kids who are struggling, and you get there you recognize right away that they are struggling, and you get to them as fast as you can. So that's always where I have been. And then through my son's evaluation when he was 5, I also discovered that we are both twice exceptional. So, you know, something I never knew about myself. I always just knew that I was different, that I was always different. But I loved learning. And so I did okay in, you know, a more traditional setting, but just growing up, not really understanding fully how your brain works or why, just knowing that it works in different ways than other people. I really didn't want that to happen to my own child. And then also to, you know, I knew that we were not the only ones. So I really wanted to expand this and to have this as an option for everyone. So we were able to add a middle school this year, which has been wonderful, and to just give students of all ages a safe place to learn and grow. And to focus on social emotional learning first, which in the schools I have worked at was not. It was all about academics and pushing academics. And then I received trauma-informed education training, which completely changed the way I looked at the way learning happens. And through that, you know, if you put that social and emotional learning first, then those academics naturally come.
I've noticed that with my grandson says that there is no punishment in the school.
Yes.
And how do you know, I come from being trained in the, you know, regular system. So how do our children supported in learning from their actions so that they shift them so that it's more helpful to the rest of the kids?
Yeah, so you can still have expectations, and not do punishment, and not do a rewards and punishment system. And a rewards and punishment system just puts a Band-Aid on it. It doesn't address what's happening underneath. And so by using a trauma-informed approach, which I have combined with my knowledge of the neurodiverse and twice exceptional brain as well, because the gifted brain also works in very different ways. And then when you add dyslexia or ADHD, which a lot of our students have both, and they're finding that that's a common trend now. Or when you have ADHD and autism, which we're also finding they go together, then that adds a different complexity to the brain that you also have to account for. So it's really about taking the time, which I learned in my trauma-informed education course, is, you know, when a student is in a highly emotional state, giving them the space to get that emotion out in a safe way where it's safe for both them and everyone else. And then really sitting down with them, and you do about a 30-minute interview with them to really get down to what is happening. And a lot of times sometimes it's not currently what is happening in this situation. It's something that happened at home that morning or that night, or it's something that happened earlier that day with a student. So then you can really get down to what is happening, and then you can address it. And we bring everybody together, and we created a conflict resolution sheet that starts with an I statement. So I feel when you do this, because, and that I added that because piece, because I was noticing before we added that because piece, we weren't really getting down to the root of it. It was still that surface level and not really, because of this is why I'm reacting this way. And then I would like you to do this. Now we have noticed as we continue to do this, that we also have to continue to revamp this. And we have noticed that just doing things one way, it doesn't work for everyone. So the steps are correct, but sometimes they have to be done in different orders based on everybody's goal within a conflict. And that's all people, in a conflict, we all have our own view and we all have our goal and what we want from this other person. And if if their view and what they want is conflicting with us, then that's where miscommunications happen. So it's really important to take the time. And sometimes we'll stop and we'll have an entire day where we'll bring a whole class together to be able to work through that so that we can all see each other's different point of views, because that's really what, I don't really like the word discipline or behavior. Like, everyone acts in a certain way, and there's always a reason. So it's really important to get down to the root of that reason and develop those skills where we are kind of constantly in life encounter people that have different views than we do. And it's really important that we practice that. And
That's a beautiful model.
Yes. And we're giving students the time to practice that in a safe setting where they have an adult there that can help mediate that. So then, as they grow and as they, when they become more independent, they will know how to handle that.
That's fantastic. It's a great model for learning how to be a human being.
Yes.
Not just learning in school. And one of the things that the system that I grew up in and my kids grew up in, that we all grew up in, was a standardized model, and you better fit in. And if you didn't fit in, that was your problem.
Yes.
And I had a question from a friend when they read about your website, and I think you've explained it, but neurodiverse includes and high exceptional includes. I think you've already said it, but just say it again so
yes.
people understand what you're referencing.
Yeah. So twice exceptional is, that means that they're the exception to the norm on both ends. So you have, your bell curve. Right. Most students fit here. So these students are in the 90th percentile or higher on the gifted side. And then they also have neurodiversity, which includes autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, anything that hinders either learning or social interactions. So they're the exception to the norm on both ends of that scale. And it, the gifted brain is very complex, and it's often not acknowledged that they also need different types of learning. Yes, because definitely. They're usually doing fine academically unless they have this neurodiverse piece, and that comes with anxiety and depression and a whole host of other things. A lot of obsessive compulsive. It comes with a lot of other, I'm struggling to find another word other than like disorders that also need to be addressed, which we do here. And then when you have a combination, which a lot of our students do, that makes it even more complex. So a lot of our students with dyslexia, they are 1 or 2 grade levels above in vocabulary and reading comprehension. So they need higher level texts to stimulate that part, but then they struggle with decoding and encoding because their brain works in 3D. And they're even saying now a dyslexic brain works in 4D sometimes,
Lord.
Which is adding like space and time.
That's fantastic, actually.
Yes, yeah, so that's why reading can be hard, is because your brain, and that's why they flip letters. And I am dyslexic and I have ADHD and I am gifted. So I was like, I completely get that, but I didn't realize that until recently, that nobody explained to me that by having dyslexia, your brain works in this way. It was always that something was wrong with me and I needed to be fixed.
That's what I've noticed. And even, way back when I was in school, those kids were wrong. There's something that they needed to stop, and they better behave. And and it's just really nice. In fact, what I find out, how do these kids, their parents maybe even, handle this different kinds of learning? What happens to them in this environment? Because some of them started with you in preschool, but kids like my grandson had years of having a really hard time in school.
That's why I really want this model to grow, because with the students that have been here since preschool and are now in 3rd and 4th grade, we did all the preventative work with them. And so they don't have the trauma that students who come in with us in middle or upper elementary or middle school, they're coming in with a lot of trauma, and it takes a lot more work to do intervention work with them. So we really have to take a step back. We have to really concentrate on that intervention work and solely focus on that social emotional, and kind of break down all of those messages that they have been sent. So a child with ADHD will receive 20,000 more negative messages by the time they are 10 than their same age peer. And there is discovering that I have ADHD and watching our students with ADHD, I was like, their brains work in really cool ways. Yes, they sometimes have a hard time stopping, but we shouldn't bring them down because of that. We should help and support them with that. And a lot of times they'll just react. So they'll have an emotion, a strong emotion about something and just react. And then once they're calmed down, if they did harm somebody during that, they will they'll come over and they'll make them a present and they're really sorry. So it's not done to intentionally harm. They are just reacting. And so it's really important that we're not demonizing that behavior. And they'll even say to me, they're like, I'm just really sorry. I'm really trying. I was like, I know you are. And I'm here to help you. And I'm here to work with you to put in supports so that you can get the strong emotion out, because we believe that no emotion is bad. But we need to redirect that. So here's a safe way to get that emotion out, that doesn't hurt you or someone else, and also doesn't sever connections that you've had, whether that's, physical, like pushing or hitting, or whether that's verbal, just saying something mean to somebody else. A lot of times they can't control that. It comes into their head, where a lot of us can, we can think something negative about somebody and keep it in our head. They can't, it just comes out. And they are really,
I've noticed that.
And they do feel really bad, that they can't control that. So we give them the tools to be able to do that.
Fantastic. I used to run a child development center, and it was a preschool. And one of the things that the parents were always asking me to do was to have papers that the children could fill out. Okay, we're talking about 3 and 4-year-olds, right? And yes. And I would say, no, that's not how we do it here, because we followed the Piaget model. Do you have to also train your parents in some way to expect the kind of education that their children are going to be getting at your school?
Yes. And, that's kind of where we're at right now. And that has been a challenge. And I get that, every parent only wants what is best for their child. And unfortunately, what society is telling us is right. And even I know all of this. I see the beautiful things that happen here every day, both socially and emotionally, as a community and academically. And it's things that I never saw in a more traditional setting ever. Where they're thinking critically, my teachers are amazing in bringing in these lessons, and just being able to also just form a lesson, like a student brings in a question. Like we had one student bring in when the Ukraine-Russia war started, and they were really curious about it. They were in upper elementary, and that teacher facilitated an amazing lesson about the history and everything in order to really answer their question, because the gifted brain, they are not going to be okay with a surface level answer. You are going to fully explain all the way. And then sometimes they need to go, if they latch onto something, they need to go all the way down that rabbit hole in order to be satisfied with that. And we allow them time to do that. So you can't have a one size fits all model. We're constantly adjusting and have to be agile in changing, because we we also don't know the student, every day is different. I think one of the best quotes I heard about the twice exceptional brain is that they're like satellite dishes. So they're unknowingly picking up on everything, the energy of the world, the the natural rhythms of nature. Everything impacts how they are when they come to us that day. So sometimes we'll have days where everybody is just kind of at each other and really high emotions. And we're like, you know what? We need to stop academics today, because if we try and push them, that's not going to be beneficial. They're not going to get what we have to teach. So let's, bring it back, understand what is happening, and then address that. So I don't, worksheets are, again, this one size fits all model, and they have a place. We got math workbooks, which some of our students love to do. They're like, hey, can I have a whole workbook? I was like, great. And I was doing work with some students, and they're like, can you grade this? And I was like, well, we don't really grade here. I was like, but I will sit with you, and because they want to know what they got wrong. So I will sit with you and I will explain to you, where your mistake is, and then we can fix it and work on it together. Like, to me, that is true learning. The other thing that I have seen is that a lot of our students, especially when they come into us in upper elementary or middle school, they have lost their love of learning. And so we work on bringing that back as well. And the reports that I have gotten back from families is they're like, oh, my child hated reading before. Now they're bringing me a stack of books, and they're like, hey, I want to read to you. Or they, one student the other day who we struggled with to get to read all year, and that's all he wants to do now. He was like, hey, I don't really want to do this activity. I just want to sit and read. It's like, I know you're really into this book and I love it. So again, we want to foster that. Like, this is really important. So I need you to do this now. And then during this time, we can allow you to continue reading.
It's one of the things that I discovered when I was running that particular child development center was that we were curtailed in many of the things we did by the regulations that the system offered. And the system is always set up according to traditional teaching methods. So one of the things that you said you did was you're trying to get a licensed model for your type of school for preschool is being developed, right?
Yes.
So how, and I guess I know the question my granddaughter has is, why can't this happen in other schools? Granddaughter, sister of boy in your school. And she's watched how he learns and how excited he is about learning and the model of learning you have. And she's getting a little disgruntled with the fact that she's in a regular school. So what do you see anything happening that can shift the elementary school model or the middle school model more into this curiosity, discovery, be out there in nature model that you have?
I would love to see that happen. Some exciting news is that the outdoor-based early childhood model is taking off in the US now. And I feel like we have always been at the forefront of it. So we started ours 4 years ago, where it was very new. Very few people knew about it. Now, Colorado will be the second state to have a licensing option for this in the early childhood. Wonderful. That goes through kindergarten. And then I am part of a committee also that meets nationwide with everyone who's trying to do this work in different states. So I think the momentum is there, and that this type of licensure will come out for other states, and that it will just continue to take off. Now, it's hard to get that to translate into elementary and middle school, because there is still that fear of academics. We are still in a mental health crisis in youth, mostly high school students, but also it's going down into middle school. And a state of emergency was established in 2021 because of this. So there was a bunch of funding for mental health that schools applied for, but unfortunately it wasn't used for that. It was used for academics, because we are solely focusing on academics when those are not the skills that top employers are looking for. Google released what they're looking for in employees, and none of it is academic skills. I mean, we now have knowledge at our fingertips. I remember saying, well, why do I have to memorize the times tables, or why do I have to do this? And they're like, well, you can't just carry a calculator with you all the time. Well, we now all have calculators with us all the time. So it's not to say that those skills aren't important and that you don't need to access multiplication facts quickly, every day. Like I use it, almost daily, some of those important math skills. And we are also in a world that is very different. So things are constantly changing, and the jobs that are available now, there's probably going to be 70% of the jobs that will be available when our kids are adults haven't been created yet. So how can we teach them skills that we don't know that they're going to need? But they are always going to need life skills. They are always going to know how to be lifelong learners, and have that love of learning and wanting to learn new things. They are always going to need to know how to work with other people, especially people who have differing views than they do. Agility, we are really going to need out. I think COVID showed us that we need out of the box thinkers, because with climate change, we're going to continue have to think of new innovative ways of doing things. And that's just where the world is. So we need to teach those skills as opposed to rote memorization, which the neurodiverse brain really struggles with. So short-term memory is hard. And I was able to do it. You can learn, you can memorize, your multiplication facts, and you can memorize the states and all of that. But how does that translate into real world? And when you're an adult, does that knowledge stay with you?
I will tell you what I really realized is I managed to adapt to the school system, but I also knew that I studied for tests. And if tests were done, I didn't have to remember it anymore.
Yes.
So it was the only time I actually went to a school that applied what I learned was when I went to massage school. I mean, this is past master's program. And I decided to change careers, but that's where I learned that, wow, what I was learning, I could actually use.
Yes.
And one of the things that fascinates me about the 4-school model and what you do is this, that the kids are like wanting to investigate something, and they do a lot of self-learning and reflective learning. And I mean, the other day, my grandson was talking about all these kinds of mushrooms that he knew, and he was making a mushroom hat. And it's like that deep dive deeper dive. Yeah. I'm interested in it. Y'all let him do it. And then he comes out with whatever he comes out with. But it's a model of learning that is not taught in the regular school system. So one of I think future generations are going to appreciate kids who are trained in this model, because we grew up in a model that you just had to memorize it and parrot it back. Yes. And if you did well at that, you could succeed in the system. But then we don't have people who want to take a look at different things. Let's look at something from a different perspective. Let's see if there are other options out there. That really isn't a thinking pattern that my generation, for sure, probably your generation, my kids' generation, weren't trained to. And one of the quotes that I love that I read on the 4-school site was, light the fires of future generations.
Yes.
Isn't that just, it gives me chills to hear that. It gives me chills to know that these kids are being prepared to be problem solvers, to dance through situations and play with them and investigate them, instead of being given the one way to do it, Yes. And my dad was a nuclear physicist. One of the things he said to me was, he said, the problem with scientists is they find one answer out of a field of answers and think it is the answer when it's not. And that's been the biggest mistake we've made. So how do we help? Is there a way that these concepts, these ideas of learning are transferable to the parents and then to other people in the community. So people start trying them on and seeing it as a valued way to come to the world. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, a lot. I would love to, I think it's just staying the course, and that is our goal as an organization, is to have a greater impact. But what I have found is that I need to prove the model first, which I think we are there, because
yes,
we still have work to do in proving that, you can still have that high academic rigor through this model. And we combine a lot of we have kind of shifted over into our elementary and middle school, using the term place-based more, because as we grow, we are making more community partnerships. So we've always had a wonderful relationship with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We use a lot of their programming frequently. We recently have developed a wonderful relationship with the Denver Art Museum, and they are really excited about what we're doing. So we're starting to go there once a month and starting to do more programming with them. I have a meeting with the Denver Zoo today as well. So it's not necessarily about, I think when people think of the forest school model, they think about being out in a forested area, and it's, very, what we consider nature is a more, not a manicured area, not a city. And I had this before I studied urban ecology in Boston, where I was like, oh, I never realized how much nature is in a city. And how much you can learn and how much is nature inspired within a city. So it doesn't have to necessarily be in this wild space. We had a hawk, our school building is in a city, and we watched a hawk eat a squirrel the other day. It went down into our outdoor area, grabbed a squirrel, and sat in the light post right outside the school. And so all the students sat on top of this covering that we have, and they just sat and watched this wonderful nature experience that you might not have seen out in a wilder space. We see a fox out at City Park all the time. There's nature everywhere, and it's more about the rhythms of nature as well, and that nature has a natural rhythm, and we have noticed that our students tend to fall within that rhythm as well. So it's really important to honor that. Like the full moon, I know every teacher knows that it is a real thing.
Yes.
On a full moon, there's the natural rhythm of the world is that emotions are just higher, and people are, more easily triggered for whatever reason. But yes, everyone has higher emotions during a full moon.
And isn't that a valuable thing to learn?
Yes.
To know that yourself. And even if as adults, they'll go like, oh, it's the full moon. That's why I'm feeling this way. And they'll be able to utilize the coping techniques or the processes that you used within themselves, but also with other people. Because one of the things is we know is that when we shift how we be in the world, those who are connected to us will also be impacted and change. So it's true. Now it's true for these kids' nuclear families. It's true for their friendship groups on their streets, but it's also true for when they enter into the workforce or they go away to college and that kind of thing. That what you're building here is a framework for their lives of how they're going to come to the world. Both in intellectual, but what I'm really appreciating is this ability for them now to find ways to handle in our society the emotional state that is kind of the norm for how their minds work. And that's beautiful, because that's what's got them in a lot of trouble, is that they didn't fit the model.
Yes, and
handling themselves correctly.
Right. Well, and a lot of neurodiverse people are in prison also, and just weren't given the help and support that they needed. And that, the school system also just fosters that school to prison pipeline for minority groups, and neurodiversity fits in that. You know, if they have started looking at more neurodiversity, and 80% of people with autism and ADHD don't have a job, even though they might have a master's degree, they at least have a college degree. And so it's also helping just our society understand that these brains are amazing. And in fact, like top people like Elon Musk are neurodiverse, because they have been able to think outside the box. But we also tend to, again, demonize that behavior when it doesn't fit into what we deem as those cultural norms as well. But a lot of entrepreneurs are neurodiverse. Because they are able to see, after working in the public school system for all over the world for years, I started to see that there needed to change. And so built this school based on that change and continue to improve it based on what we see needs to happen, kind of getting away from the fact that nature has to be in a wild space. It has to be up in the mountains, or it has to be out in the woods, where you can still get the benefits of being outside and out in nature in a city, which is, which is more accessible to people.
Yeah, where you are now, I mean, my grandson talks about going over to City Park to do stuff, and you have outdoor days and that kind of thing. And I think it's a wonderful model for them to find nature where they can find it. And I love the fact that you're engaging with these different institutions for, like I said, I think it impacts not the child, but also the people in those institutions. What do you do about, like, you end at 8th grade right now? How do you transfer those children or get them prepared for the regular school system in high school?
Yeah, that has been something we've, sorry.
It's okay, hon, don't worry.
We have been debating, and we've gone back and forth. I've met with, our board and our staff, should we continue to go through high school? So at what point will students be ready to be in a more traditional setting? And, our goal is to really help them understand who they are and the way that their brain works. And when you do that, and then to advocate for themselves. So, for example, knowing that I had dyslexia, I was able to get supports all through college. But then when I did my master's program, I no longer qualified for those. And so in my thesis course, and my professor, she was like, look, my PhD is in English. So, and if there's spelling errors or grammar errors in your papers, like, it really bothers me. So please make sure you proofread. And I just went up to her afterwards and I was like, hey, I have dyslexia. I try really hard to ensure that I don't have mistakes, but no matter how many times I proofread it, there are always mistakes. I was like, here's what I do to counteract that. On big papers, I have somebody edit it for me before I submit it. And she just thanked me. She was like, thank you so much for coming and telling me that. I completely understand. If you need any supports, just let me know. And then after I graduated, she was like, Megan, I just want to let you know that you're a beautiful writer. And she's like, yeah, you had some spelling and grammar errors, but that didn't take away from your writing.
So you're learning them how to, stand up for what their needs are.
Yes.
And that will help them through the system, even though the system is very different than what how they've learned to learn within your school.
Yeah, because once you spark that love of learning, I read an amazing book about a teacher in Chicago, and he ended up creating his 5th grade classroom. He set it up to be very democratic. So everything was voted on. And he ended up doing Project Citizen with them, which is a nationwide company where you choose a project within your community that you want to change. And that's what he did all year with his class. And he went through similar things. He was like, by not following the curriculum, that's all he focused on. By not following the curriculum, were they really developing those skills or like the standards or those benchmarks that they're supposed to? And he debated that all year. And then some students who were really quiet all year, who weren't really participating, he was like, are they really learning anything? And they were. So what ended up happening was, it was also an election year. So they were trying to find money. They decided that their project should be to get a new school building because it was in Caprini Green. Their school building was just falling apart. Nobody even wanted to go into the bathroom. And somebody wanted to donate money, but not with the best of intentions in doing that. So the debate was, should they take that money or not? And they went back and forth, and the teacher was like, should I intervene? And, because it wasn't right to take the money because it was for political gain. But he decided not to. And then the student that had been really quiet all year stood up and gave this analogy about like a record label that the teacher he was like, I did not get the analogy, but the rest of the students did. And they're like, oh yeah, we should absolutely not take the money. And so even if you have a student that's not actively participating, they are still there and everybody learns in different ways. So we have lots of students who just kind of sit and take in that information. And then when they're ready, then they participate and then they use it. But the more we push them, the more we're going to push away that love of learning instead of just recognizing that that's who they are. And I had the third edition. So they went back and interviewed these students and they were in high school at that point. And they said that they probably still wouldn't be in high school had it not been for that teacher in that year. So he really instilled that love of learning. So it really, once that's there, then I really feel like, students can, and when they understand themselves, then they can be successful. But we do have a lot of students with a lot of high anxiety. And we do want to find the right fit for them. So we are working on looking at other high schools and partnering with them. There are high schools in the area that also focus on neurodiverse and twice exceptional. And then just making sure that they have the skills to go wherever they want to go, whether they want to go to college or they want to go into a trade. Because that's the other thing is maybe not everybody wants to go to college, which is also okay. People are very happy and make very good livings in the trades, which we need more of.
Yeah, there was a point, and I think it's shifting, where I talked to men in the trades, and they said they couldn't get young people, that the bright kids were wanting to be programmers, and they couldn't get them into the trades, though the trades made as much money, but the stigma was it worse than if you work with your hands. What I found as a massage therapist is I learned everything through my hands.
Yeah.
My hands informed me all the time about what was going on in the person's body. And I would assume that's true for a plumber, an electrician, all of them, that they have a mental knowledge, but they also have, my guess is they're intuitives, that they have an intuitive knowing of what could be wrong with this system. But it's also that investigative mind that maybe that's what caused this. We stopped encouraging. Well, when I grew up, there was no encouragement of investigation. And it seems that your school, and probably the four school model, really encourage investigation.
Yes. And so does the place-based model, which that one is also taking off. And there's a lot more statistics on place-based, where they're finding that schools that switch over to place-based learning, their test scores significantly increase as well.
So what is place-based?
It's very similar to the forest school. It's just about establishing a sense of place where you're at. So that's what I like that name better, because it could be anywhere. And you can develop a deep sense of place anywhere. An alleyway. One of my classes up in Boulder, we were right in front of the Flatirons, and one day there was so much to look at and do in this parking lot, to investigate in this parking lot, that we spent 3 hours. We didn't leave the parking lot with the Flatirons right behind us. Other days we were over in the Flatirons, but it had rained and there was water coming down, and we were looking at drainage systems, and there were things growing out of the cracks because the building had been shut down and wasn't maintained. And so it's just an old parking lot. And so you can develop a sense of place anywhere. It can be your backyard. It can be an alleyway. It can be a ditch. And that it doesn't have to be this wild space. But developing that sense of place is just like a sense of belonging, which is why, so many of our students have established their sense of place as City Park. They love City Park.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And they love going back there. And even after they leave our programs, they request to go back there. And a lot of parents told me before starting in our program, they're like, we didn't even know City Park, all that was out there, because we would just go to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, or we would just go to the Denver Zoo, which are also located there. And they didn't venture out into the park.
So isn't that wonderful though, that the programs that are coming up now are, well, allowing someone to be in a space or a place and really kind of look at it deeply and everything that's going on there,
Mm-hmm.
versus walking through it. We have, a lot of people, I think, go through life somewhat unconscious. You just walk down the street, you don't notice anything that's going on either side of you.
Yes.
And you don't even get curious about it. Whereas it seems like your model and this place-based model all have an honoring of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just read a quote, I think it was from another forest school, but it was raining and it was a preschool student and they got really excited when they found their friend, and they were all like, that like happy squeal. And they were like, it's
Yes.
worm day, because it was raining. And so we, like, when it rains, with our early childhood, we spend the majority of the day like looking for puddles to splash in and investigating worms. And then they have so many questions, and so we dive deep into that. And what I grew up learning is that worms come out of the ground so that they don't drown underground, but that's not true. It's actually that it's safer for them to move because they need moisture. So that's why they come up, is they can move, and they can, that's also, they do a lot of the mating at that point as well, because it's safer to be outside.
Now, isn't that amazing? I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yes. Yeah. All from preschoolers, being really excited and curious about worms coming out when it rains. Also, the different layers of the snow. There's different temperatures of the layers of the snow. So, when students ask those questions, I'm like, yeah, let's see what we can do. So we ended up getting temperature guns and measuring the different temperatures of snow at different layers. And there were questions about, well, with all the pollution in the air, just being out in the snow as it's snowing, with all the pollution in the air, is it safe for me to eat this snow? And so, we investigated it. I was like, yeah, so that first layer you don't want to eat, because that acts like a scrub brush. So that picks up all the pollutants. But then after that, those top layers are very safe, because as it continues to snow, it continues to scrub that pollution out of the air.
Well, isn't that nice to know? Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's eating snow a lot. When, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but these are just from questions that students asked from just being outside and being curious.
And isn't that learning that is anchored in the brain more than if they were in a classroom learning that? Let's say that was a factoid classroom teacher talk. Isn't the learning deeper and more permanent when they have asked the question and they investigate it? Yes.
And if it's done through play. So, we often think of play as a break from work, when it is work. And studies have found, there have been a variety of different ones, but basically that it only takes 10 repetitions through play, as opposed to over 200 when it is just presented to them.
Oh my God.
And I would say that's the same, because I feel like just going out for a walk in the snow, that's play. And they ask so many questions when we're out. Like they're sledding right now, and there are so many benefits to sledding. There's academic benefits, there's social and emotional benefits. Sledding is a really amazing activity to do. And oftentimes students don't have the opportunity to do that in school. And I would say that it's more impactful when it's done together in a group.
Because they feed on each other, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they feed on each other. What do you see as the future of this kind of education impacting the larger standardized education?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. Can you just give me a minute, Arlo?
Sure, I know.
Can you go tell Callie everybody's out of the park?
Okay.
But I think it's important work, which is why it hasn't been easy at all. We are one of the only schools doing this. We were the only one that ran the pilot program. Another group started with us in the pilot program with their early childhood and ended up dropping out because it's not easy. It's not easy to prove a new model and why it works. And you do have that societal fear that creeps in. I still have it. And I have all the research, and, I see it every day. And sometimes it creeps in, and I have to go back to that and what I know and be like, yes, my child is going to be fine. Yes, he has dyslexia and is struggling to read, but he will get there. And I don't have to push him. I put things in place for him to help and support him in that. But I also can't ignore that he is also 1 or 2 grade levels above in vocabulary and reading comprehension. So I give him audiobooks because he needs higher level text to stimulate that, which a lot of schools, when you have a classroom of 30 or more, which I have taught in, you can't do that individualized learning. You can't get to really know each student. And I remember when I went from a classroom of 30 here in Colorado at a charter school to working in Alaska, where I had 15. It was a native village in Alaska where I had 15 students, and they were all high needs, but I could get to know each one of them, and I knew what each one needed. And I was given the support to be able to sit down with them and to do those 30-minute interviews to really get down to what is happening. I had one student who would completely melt down if she didn't know the answer to a question, and she would tip over her desk and throw her chair. And as I worked with her, those slowly started to decrease. I gave her a safe space to get that out because I recognized that she just needed to get that out. And then she would come to me and she'd be like, I need help. Instead of me trying to push her to ask for help first, this was just her process. And once I recognized that, I could put in something different for her. And I could do that for each student. I could put in something different for each student because I only had 15 students, which is manageable. And I was given the support by the school to be able to do that.
That's the really important key, that you had the support, because that's sometimes what I hear from teachers is they don't get the support in trying to do something different to meet a kid's needs.
Yes.
And that's sad. But that's something we have to address in the larger system. We had a question earlier from somebody. If somebody likes this model of learning but don't live in Denver, are there places where they could find your type of model school? Is it the Force School site they go to, or this place-based, or what?
No, so we have combined a lot of different things, but the trauma-informed education with the conflict resolution. So I have taken all of my knowledge and what I have learned throughout the years and combine it. And we are working on creating a curriculum because I am getting calls from people all over the country, and they're like, hey, I had to pull my child out of school because they really aren't doing well. But there is no school like yours in my area. Do you have something? Can you help? And so that is why we are working on a curriculum that we will have out. But then we also want to expand this model and have it grow into other states, which would be great. But again, that's going to take time. But I think this curriculum will be the right way for now. and just giving people kind of a beginning, a starting point on where to go from here.
I think that's the wonderful part is that even though all the parents grew up in the other system, they, like you, probably didn't fit.
Yes.
And we don't want that for our children, and we don't want it for our grandchildren either. You're looking ahead to future generations and saying, how do we make this world a place that these children can thrive in and create new and wonderful futures that we can't even imagine?
Yes.
And that sounds like what your curriculum is doing. It really is. And I just want to thank you very much. Thank you from a grandmother who I can't tell you the difference in my grandson. My family notices it when he's with them. So it's gone from overall behavior change in him because of being in your environment. And I listened to him talk about how you handle, well, one, he loves the curiosity and the learning, but how you handle the social emotional issues. He was not an object of it, but he has been part of the resolution of it. And I think that's made a huge difference for him. And I just want to thank you for that. It's been wonderful. Any last words that you'd like to offer to our audience in support of learning for their children or their grandkids?
I would just say, the more that we can advocate for change, the better. And that I am always a resource and available. And this is my true passion. I love what I do. And even though it's been hard and hasn't been a straightforward road, and that we're still improving here at the school, there does need to be change. And I think everyone is recognizing that and not really knowing how to go about doing that. But the beautiful things that I see here every day are just inspirational, and I feel will create a better world. And that's what I want for everyone.
Creating a better world. That's the name of the game. Create a new reality so that everyone can thrive. Right. One of the things that we say in the group I'm in is that we are all unique and essential to the world.
Yes.
And we want to support everyone being honored as their unique and essential self.
Yeah. And that's what we do.
That's what I think your school does. Thank you so much, Megan. I so appreciate you taking the time.
Yes.
And